Oh my God, you guys. They are now saying that Diddy and his own mother might be staring down financial crime charges. This is not a drill. Put your phone down, sit your behind in a chair, and listen, because if what's being reported is accurate, this could be the beginning of the end for both of them. So quick rewind. Remember the last time we talked about this whole mess? Our beleaguered heroine, Mama Janice Combs, was out here demanding justice for her son. And a lot of us were side-eyeing like, ma'am, you are the one who raised him. I'm not saying birds of a feather and all that, but let's be real. A chipmunk does not hatch out of a goose egg. You get what I'm saying? Anyway, let me get to the point because this latest development, it's serious. A new article just dropped in page 6 and it is interesting, disturbing actually. You remember when I told you there were probably more charges coming for Diddy and that they weren't just going to be about the sex stuff. Because as disgusting as it is, we have all seen how this system works. From case files to high-profile lawsuits, the world barely blinks when it's women or kids being harmed. People move slow, drag their feet, play dumb. But when you start messing with money, when you start playing games with taxes, cash, and the federal government's cut, that is when they stop playing with you. Al Capone didn't go down for violence. He went down for tax evasion. The U.S. government will let a lot slide, but not their money. And what's in this article lines up perfectly with that pattern. Now I read the page 6 story, and then I reached out to one of my legal contacts to break it down. What they told me makes this look a lot bigger than just one club appearance. This might very well be the first visible crack in the wall for Diddy, and possibly for his mama too. Unless, of course, if charges come, Diddy decides to take the full blame himself. And if that day comes, we're all going to see exactly how much he really loves his mother. Here, that's what page 6 is reporting. The piece is about Sean Diddy, Combs being a full-on mama's boy, and it says that in 2023, he did a paid appearance at a Miami club and had his $100,000 fee paid in cash. Not to him directly, but to a company named after his then 84-year-old mother, Janice Combs. So picture this. It's May 2023, Miami, Formula One race week. Hot, flashy, rich people everywhere, cars screaming around a track, and the city turning into a luxury circus. As part of those festivities, Diddy does a party appearance at the M2 nightclub as a kickoff for race week on May 4. On May 1, just a few days before that event, organizers receive a contract with some very specific instructions. According to page 6, that contract said, Diddy's $100,000 appearance fee would be paid in 2 installments. All payment must be made in cash. And it all had to be paid according to written instructions tied to a company named after his mother, something like Janice Combs Music Holdings. Not Bad Boy Entertainment. Not Love Records. Not some big corporate entity with accountants and lawyers and standard invoices. No, a company in Mama Janice's name, paid in cash. Now keep the timeline in mind. Less than a year later, in March 2024, federal agents raided Diddy's homes, and at the same time he was facing a stack of civil lawsuits with massive potential damages and allegations that range from abuse to trafficking to all kinds of misconduct. So we've got a big pile of lawsuits, a federal raid, serious public allegations, and in the background, a pattern starting to emerge with large chunks of money being moved in cash through his mother's company. Page 6 says Diddy's team did not respond to their request for comment on this. Now here's where it really gets interesting. After I read the article, I hit up one of my legal people like, break this down for me like I'm 5 because this sounds messy. And what they told me was basically, this is not good news for Diddy. Let me walk you through what they said, because it's actually pretty serious. The $100,000 in cash is a big, loud IRS red flag. The article says the club paid the fee in cash. That's already unusual for a legitimate six-figure appearance by somebody that famous. Normally, that would be a wire transfer, a check, or a payment routed through a regular corporate account, with a contract, an invoice, and records that accountants and lawyers can track. Why? Because the IRS wants a paper trail. You get a big check, somebody files a 1099 or reports it as a business expense. There are records. But when you demand cash and you do it through a side company, and that cash doesn't obviously pass through normal accounting, it starts to look like someone's trying to bypass the usual reporting requirements. As my legal contact put it, large cash payments that avoid wire transfers or checks are exactly the kind of thing the IRS looks at when they're investigating under-the-table deals, unreported income, or potential money laundering. Mama Janice's role puts her directly in the financial line of fire. The article suggests that the contract wasn't even with Diddy personally. It was with this company linked to Janice Combs. Now, it's not 100% clear who physically walked into the club to pick up those paper bags of money. The reporting hints that Diddy's mother either collected the cash herself or that the money was collected on behalf of her company. Either way here, that's why that matters. If Janice, or someone working for her, was the intermediary, the go-between, for a large, undocumented cash payment that puts her right in the middle of the financial trail and potentially in the middle of a criminal investigation if that money wasn't properly reported. And then there's the question of roles getting blurred. If Janice is acting like a business agent, a representative, or a front for Diddy's financial dealings, but that's not properly documented, no contracts, no formal agency paperwork, no clean tax reporting that entangles her in whatever comes next. My legal source told me bluntly, if that income wasn't properly documented on either Diddy's returns or the business returns, and she's physically handling the cash, or her company is, that makes her not just a witness, but potentially a participant. So now we're not just talking about Diddy did XYZ. We're talking about who else touched the money, who else knew, who else helped move it. And Mama Janice is right there in the middle of that picture. 3. What kind of charges could this lead to? Let me break down the main possibilities my legal contact laid out. Again, this is if the facts are as reported and if the money wasn't properly reported. But if so, these are the lanes prosecutors could drive down. A. Tax evasion, unreporting income. If that $100,000 cash payment was never reported as income to the IRS, by Diddy, by his companies, or by Janice's company, that's classic tax evasion territory. The IRS doesn't care if you were paid in cash, crypto, wire, cattle, or cupcakes. If it's compensation for services, like a paid club appearance, it is taxable, especially when it's a six-figure sum. So the logic is, the club owner says, we paid Diddy's team $100,000 in cash. There's a contract showing that agreement. But when the IRS looks at Diddy's or Janice's filings for that year, they don't see that income. That discrepancy alone can be enough to trigger an investigation. B. Aiding and abetting tax evasion. If Janice, or her company, collected that cash knowing it was set up like that to keep it off the books, she could be exposed to claims of aiding and abetting tax evasion, or assisting in concealing income. Even if she didn't design the scheme, if she knowingly helped move the money in a way that hid it, prosecutors can argue she was part of the effort. And even if they don't charge her outright, they can absolutely drag her in as a key witness, put pressure on her, and use that to go harder at Diddy. See structuring/money laundering concerns. My legal contact also pointed out that while structuring usually refers to breaking up deposits to avoid bank reporting limits, using an intermediary person or shell company to scoop up a giant pile of cash instead of using a standard wire can still get looked at under money laundering statutes. Why? Because when you intentionally avoid the banking system, avoid electronic records, and route large sums through side doors, it starts to look like an attempt to hide the true source or final destination of the money. And prosecutors love patterns. If they find one $100K cash deal run through Mom, they are going to go digging for more. D. Unregistered or improperly documented agent activity. Another angle my legal contact mentioned. If Janice was effectively acting as an agent or representative for Diddy, negotiating deals, receiving payments, handling contracts, but she wasn't formally registered or documented as such, that complicates the legal and tax status of these payments. It can look like a deliberate attempt to keep Diddy's name off certain documents, sidestep corporate structures, and push money into a more private, less visible channel. The paperless trail problem and why the club owner matters. Here's where Diddy might really be in trouble. Even though the payment itself was in cash, the club owner's testimony and the contract still create a record. So we now have a signed agreement spelling out the amount and the cash requirement. A club owner reportedly saying, "Yes, we paid them $100,000 in cash." A company tied to Mama Janice named in the paperwork. That means the defense of "there's no record, it was just cash" doesn't fly the same way anymore. If the IRS or federal investigators can see the club's records showing $100K going out, but no matching income on Diddy's or Janice's side, that mismatch is often more than enough to justify subpoenas, audits, and potentially criminal charges. So I asked my legal contact, wait, doesn't this also put the club owner in trouble? Aren't they admitting they paid someone that much in cash without proper documentation? And they said, yes, technically the club could also have exposure, unless the owner is now cooperating, which is very possibly why this is leaking into page 6. They explained that if the club owner comes forward, hands over documents, and files the right paperwork, for example, using IRS Form 211 to report a violation, they can go from being a possible target to a whistleblower, which comes with potential legal protections and in some cases even financial rewards. So the fact that this is being discussed on the record in a major outlet with this level of detail, that strongly suggests somebody is talking, and not just casually talking in a way that's being strategically documented. Why would this be in page 6 of all places? I asked that too. Why page 6? Why now? Why this detail? My legal contact said something that stuck with me. This is death by 1,000 little paper cuts. What they meant was, the government doesn't always come out of nowhere with one giant, dramatic RICO case on day one. Sometimes they build slowly. One contract here, one club there, one cash payment here, another witness there. Each little paper cut seems small on its own, but together they create a pattern, and that pattern is what gets you indicted. So not only might this club owner be cooperating, but whoever is feeding this story to page 6 could be signaling to other clubs, other promoters, other business partners. Hey, if you also did cash deals with Diddy or his companies, now is the time to come clean. That's what my source meant by a bat signal. A quiet public warning that the IRS and federal prosecutors are actively looking at how this man moved his money. The big question: why risk everything for $100,000? So I pushed back, because honestly, this was my first thought too. If Diddy is really a billionaire or even close, why would he risk IRS smoke, federal attention, and criminal charges over $100,000? That's couch cushion money at that level. Why bother? And the answer I got was, you're looking at it like he's a billionaire, but you have to look at what's actually been happening to his empire. And then they laid it out. Over the last several years, people in the industry and independent financial analysts have been whispering, and in some cases outright saying, that Diddy's wealth isn't what the headlines used to claim. At one point, he was widely reported as a billionaire, but behind the scenes, some analysts have been estimating him in the $400 million range instead. Now, before you say, $400 million is still rich, remember. Most of that may not be cash. It's tied up in real estate, art, long-term investments, illiquid assets. Meanwhile, he's been hit with dozens of civil suits, many of them extremely serious and extremely expensive to defend. He lost major brand deals, like his huge liquor partnership that was once touted as approaching $1 billion valuation. He was reportedly forced to sell his stake in Revolt TV. He's allegedly been liquidating big assets, selling his private jet, valued somewhere around $60 million, unloading luxury properties like his LA mansion, all to cover legal fees, settlements, and the day-to-day costs of keeping this gigantic machine running while everything crashes down. And as my legal source put it, for someone staring down a mountain of lawsuits and the possibility of a multi-year federal sentence, cash on hand, liquidity, is way more important than the big headline net worth number. So maybe $100,000 is still small in the grand scheme, but if you're losing deals, selling assets, bleeding money on lawyers, potentially paying hush settlements, then those off-the-books cash chunks become very, very useful. They can be used to pay personal expenses, keep loyal people quiet, fund a private economy where you can pay folks without leaving a trace in a standard bank statement. And this is exactly what some of those earlier lawsuits and court filings hinted at, that Diddy allegedly ran a kind of cash-based shadow system where he could pay people for questionable work, reward loyalty, buy silence, and keep everything away from official corporate records. Now add to that something else my legal contact reminded me of. In places like Florida, there are strong homestead protections, laws that make it hard for creditors to take your primary residence. So if someone is moving money, flipping assets, and repositioning their wealth, they might be trying to shield certain properties, protect certain homes, and still maintain a secret stream of cash to live on or to pay people. They told me that's another long conversation for another video, and I agree. But the point is, every dollar T doesn't show up on paper becomes more valuable to someone whose official accounts, businesses, and assets are being watched, frozen, or picked apart. My legal contact called this kind of thing the 100K ghost payment logic. Think about it this way. If the club had wired $100,000 straight into a bad boy business account, it would show up on bank statements, accounting ledgers, tax returns, and eventually in discovery if a lawyer subpoenaed the records. Plaintiffs' attorneys could easily say, okay, on this date, Diddy was paid $100K, where did that money go? But if that same $100,000 is paid in cash, collected by his mother's company, not run through standard accounts, and never properly reported, then as far as bank statements and formal records go, that money vanishes. It becomes walking around money, hush money, take care of this for me money, help the family money, without being easily traceable in any kind of corporate or personal banking trail that lawyers can subpoena. Now zoom out. If he did this with one club in Miami, he could have done it with multiple clubs, done it with brand deals, done it with guest appearances, done it with features, after parties, walkthroughs. 10 deals like that. That's $1 million in ghost cash. Dozens of deals over years. Now you're talking potentially millions and millions of dollars that are not on the books, not on the tax returns, but sitting somewhere in somebody's safe, storage, or quietly pushed into other hands. And that right there is why $100K matters. It's not just one payment, it's the pattern that payment suggests. Let me tie this together. We have a high-profile celebrity already under intense federal and civil scrutiny. A documented $100,000 cash payment funneled through a company named after his mother. A club owner willing to talk on the record to a major outlet. A contract specifying cash only with detailed payment instructions. A mother whose alleged physical or corporate involvement could make her a critical witness or someone who herself faces questions about aiding in concealment. When my legal contact looked at all of this, they said, if the IRS finds records of that payment on the club's books, but doesn't see matching income on any of Diddy's or Janice's filings, that discrepancy alone could justify a full-blown financial crimes investigation. And once investigators open that door, they don't stop at one incident, they start pulling more contracts, more club deals, more appearance fees, more bank records, more witnesses. That's what death by 1,000 paper cuts looks like in real life. So let me be very clear. I do not think it's a coincidence that this story landed in page 6 of all places. With this level of detail about cash, contracts, and Mama Janice's company. With the club owner talking on the record instead of hiding behind sources say. I also don't think it's a coincidence that this is coming out after the raids, the lawsuits, the public pressure, and growing whispers about Diddy's financial house of cards. This absolutely feels like someone, whether it's prosecutors, investigators, lawyers, or cooperating witnesses, is testing the waters, sending signals, and setting up the narrative for a potential financial case. And I'm telling you right now, history has shown over and over again that with powerful men involved in messy, violent, and abusive allegations, it's often the financial crimes that finally bring them down. Not because the system suddenly cares about victims, but because the system always cares about its money. So here's where I land on this. If things happen the way the club owner and page 6 describe, if that $100,000 was paid in cash, routed through a company tied to Janice Combs, and not properly reported, then both Diddy and his mother could be in very deep trouble. Maybe the feds lean on her to get to him. Maybe they dangle potential charges over her head to pressure cooperation. Maybe Diddy steps in and says, "It was all me. She didn't know anything," and tries to protect her. And that's when we're going to see, in real time, how much he really loves his mama. Because love is cute in interviews and Instagram posts. But love is something very different when you're deciding who takes the fall and who goes under oath. I don't think the federal government is done with him. I don't think the state is done with him. And I definitely do not think his alleged victims are done with him. By the pricking of my thumbs or the twitching of my spirit. Something wicked feels like it's still coming Diddy's way. I'll be watching this closely so you don't have to, and I'll break down every new piece that drops. In the meantime, tell me in the comments, do you think this $100K cash deal is just a one-off? Or do you think it's the tip of a much bigger iceberg? And if it comes down to it, do you think Diddy takes the hit to protect his mother, or do they both try to stand separately? Let me know what you think. I'll talk to you later. Bye.